What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals in our 2021 NFL season preview. Also, wanted to make note real quick, gonna have a couple of different elements mixed into this video. Comment down what you think about these changes I've added, but also give me your thoughts on the Cincinnati Bengals. I'd love to have a discussion about what is a really up-and-coming, young, promising team. I'm really excited to see what they do moving forward. And hopefully you all like the changes and what I've added. Hopefully you like the video overall. And if you do, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. Also, if you want to go down to the description, get my Twitter. You can DM me what you think about the changes. And when you're seeing this video, also, it's Thursday. So if you want to talk about the NBA draft, feel free to reach out and DM me. But without further ado, let's talk about the Bengals. 4 to 8 wins, pretty big window, and it's two very different results. If this team goes 4 wins, Zach Taylor loses his job. But if they're 8-9, he might have an argument to keep it, especially if this offense looks promising and it feels like the organization's, a couple of defensive pieces away. I'm not entirely sure Zach Taylor makes it through this upcoming season, but I have said multiple times, he has put together some awesome game plans, specific as a Steelers fan. A couple games against Pittsburgh where he really gave Mike Tomlin a run for his money and maybe even outdueled him in those 2 games, as corny and as nerdy as that sounds. But he really has put together a couple of games where you see where this guy can be a really quality head coach. But now we need to see it over 17-game, period. And for the Cincinnati team, I have them winning 5 games. I think they're going to have to get into a lot of shootouts to win those 5 games. I just think the defense is just not where it needs to be for this team to, I know a lot of people have put long shot bets on them making the playoffs or, them over their win total. I'm not entirely sure they get there yet. It depends on, a guy like Trey Hendrickson, who's on your screen right now, and Trey Waynes we'll talk about later. I guess there's pieces in place, but I still see the defense as one of the worst in the NFL, who doesn't generate a whole lot of pass rush, has some question marks at the CB core, especially losing William Jackson. Jesse Bates is a stud, and Von Bell's pretty good, but a lot of question marks on that defense. So I think that anchors this team down. I'm in that lower half of that win range that I put up on your screen. But again, let me know in the comments. Do you think this team can go 500? There's a lot of people who are really touting the Bengals in a high note. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who think the Bengals have a better record than the Steelers, which that 3-4 in the AFC North is pretty interesting. It's something we'll talk about as this series moves forward. Realistic goal, find some keepers on defense. This goes back to what I'm really trying to get at with this team. The offense looks really good. They need to improve the offensive line. They're a couple pieces away, really good offensive linemen, from having a really quality unit. We'll talk about Jonah Williams here in a little bit, so I'll save that. But, Riley Reif's a rental. What do you have in Jackson Carman? Is he your right tackle of the future, or is he slated to play right guard? Is Michael Jordan any better? He's been pretty rough. What do you have in Quentin Spain? Can he stay healthy? Trey Hopkins, also a decent young interior offensive lineman. So trying to figure out the offensive line, but I think this offense puts up points with the best of them across the league. That wide receiver room, Joe Mixon, I like Chris Evans out of Michigan, and Joe Burrow, if he's healthy, looks like a franchise QB in the making. So it comes down to when this team is in a position to win a Super Bowl, say, 3 years' time, when they're in that position to become serious contenders, who on this team could be a part of that long-term picture, right? Is it a guy like Trey Hendrickson, or is it something where, he has the contract he has now, but after that, we should probably go in another direction. They've already re-signed Chris Hubbard. That happened literally just the other day from when I'm recording this. So they think he's, at least a part of the mix for the next 4 years. $10 million is more than you'd pay just a rotational edge guy. And Hubbard needs to improve as a pass rusher, but he's already really good against the run. So you feel like, having a guy like Trey Hendrickson in the mix and, maybe just better coaches in general, or, just a breakthrough season on the horizon for Chris Hubbard. If he can improve as a pass rusher, then he becomes someone who's definitely worth $10 million. But he's also beloved there. He's a hometown kid. So I know the business side of why they make that signing. But continue on this point, is Logan Wilson someone they want as a starting linebacker in their championship window, right? Is Trey Wayne someone who's a long-term piece? I think Jesse Bates has solidified his role in that, but, Von Bell, is he someone who, by that point, we're late 20s, early 30s, if memory serves, in 3 years' time? Is he going to be someone who you can count on? Mike Hilton signs a 4-year deal, so you figure he's probably in the mix there, and he's a really good playmaker, knows how to rush the passer from that slot position, and he just creates turnovers, and that's what this team really could use. So I think this season gives you the opportunity to really just focus in on the defense and say, here are some players who could be a part of our championship window, and maybe you find nobody, and it's a total retooling process, but that's what this season, I think, serves as realistically for the Cincinnati Bengals. Reach goal, hey, finish over 500. If this team gets to 9-8, they'll be one of the funnest 9-win teams I've seen in my lifetime because they will drop buckets of points on the scoreboard. I don't even know if that's like something people say, but this team will score, like I said earlier, with the best of them. And if they have 9 wins, that means they won a lot of games, 35-30, 38-35, maybe even into the 40s. I mean, they're going to have to put up a ton of points, and then the offensive numbers off of that are going to be gaudy. Like Jamar Chase, realistically, if this team goes 9 wins, they have a chance to have 3 receivers over 1,000 yards, and I don't think it's really implausible that it happens even if they don't, just given those 3 guys are studs. They're going to want to pass the ball a lot, and Joe Burrow, if he's healthy, can put it on the money. So if this team gets over 500, like I said, they're going to be as fun a team in the NFL to watch. But it's a reach goal, and I'm not entirely sure it happens. Obviously, I put my win range just short of that, so it's a very slim pathway for them to get there. But maybe you think otherwise, and if you do, let me know in the comments. Let's talk about some X factors here, and this will be one of the new elements I've added on here. So I'm relying heavily on PFF for this offensive line production numbers for Jonah Williams, and I think PFF I find a lot of what they talk about fascinating, but especially offensive line production. They have the best source, and they have proven to be the most accurate when grading offensive linemen, even defensive linemen for that matter. So I really like how they do it, and you could see the numbers weren't terrible last year. The overall grade just over 70. That's good enough for a left tackle, but you have to remember, Jonah Williams last year was basically a rookie. He missed his true rookie season, so while last year was on paper year 2 of the Williams experiment at left tackle, even though I think he would be better as a guard, but I think he'll be fine as a tackle. But last year really was his rookie year, and these numbers are okay. They're really not that bad for a rookie offensive lineman, considering most of the time we see, tackles in specific take that leap forward in year 3 to 4. So I think this is a good starting spot for Jonah Williams. And if he only gets that much better, if he just takes a little bit of a leap forward, an incremental step in the right direction, then he's a quality left tackle for this team moving forward. And that helps workshop, and that's where I think this offensive line has improved. Natural progression for guys like Jonah Williams, and then you add in Jackson Carman, so he's a good quality swing tackle minimum right now, probably your right tackle of the future. Riley Reif had a bounce back season, one of his probably best season as an NFL player last year. Now you're shifting him from the left side to the right side. Do you think that makes it even easier for him? Quentin Spain, if he's healthy, big addition there. So I think this offensive line has improved. I don't think they're great, but I think they are better compared to where they were last year, and part of that is just natural progression for Jonah Williams, assuming he does continue to get better. The next X factor, it's got to be Trey Hendrickson, right? This guy leads the New Orleans Saints in sacks, but yet, when given the opportunity to franchise tag him, they don't. And they always kept him in this rotational role, and I always wondered what that was about. And part of it's like, Cam Jordan's one of the all-time Saints, right? He might be the most iconic, at least in my lifetime, most iconic Saints defensive player in my lifetime for sure. But even just overall, like he's up there. He would be on their defensive Mount Rushmore in my eyes. And then you have Marcus Davenport on the other side, who you gave up a ton to move up earlier in the first round to get that pick from Green Bay to select Davenport. So it feels like sunken costs might play a factor there, where we have to have Davenport on the field to make good on that investment. But still, it was interesting to see, despite Hendrickson's success, how he was just the third guy. So then you add on the fact New Orleans doesn't franchise tag him. That feels like New Orleans doesn't see him in the same light that Cincinnati clearly sees him at, giving him $15 million a year. And they could have given that $15 per year to Carl Lawson, and maybe they did make that offer to Lawson, and he just didn't want to come back, and he'd rather go play for Robert Saleh up in New York. If that's the case, totally understand his rationale. And then you have Trey Hendrickson making the same amount 1 year longer on the contract, but then he just becomes that replacement. But does that pass rush production carry over to a new place? Can he be a 13.5 sack guy in Cincinnati? Because this is a team that desperately needs pass rush. And it's so interesting because they get rid of Carlos Dunlap, and his numbers go through the roof in regards to efficiency when he gets to Seattle. And like I said earlier, Sam Hubbard's never been one to be a great pass rusher, really good against the run, but has not taken a step forward as a pass rusher. So does Hendrickson give you that guy you need to have on the edge? Or, is it a system thing? Is it a coaching thing where they just do not have these pass rushers in the right spot, or they're not being coached up properly? We'll find out this year. If Hendrickson can be a 13 sack guy for this defense, then they might have a pathway to being over 500. But I am just not entirely sold on that, given it's a 1 year sample we're dealing with Hendrickson. He was stuck in a rotational role in New Orleans and was playing alongside two really talented players in Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport. But hey, now he's going to be a down-by-down starter for a team that doesn't have the same amount of talent around him. So this is going to be the true litmus test for Trey Hendrickson. On to another Trey. Final X factor is Trey Wayne, spelled separately, which is kind of cool. But look, this is a guy by the end of his time in Minnesota was playing the best football of his career. And he got better incrementally year by year in Minnesota. Then obviously the injury last year derails a ton of that momentum. I remember when he signed that contract with Cincy, I was like, man, the Bengals have a lot of money to spend, but now that it just feels like they're not using it wisely. Just because you have money to spend doesn't mean that you use it inadequately, right? Like if you win the lottery, it doesn't mean you go blow it on a bunch of shit that's, not going to matter, in a week's time or whatever. Pardon my language and, different, realm that we're talking about here. But after then reviewing the film and seeing how he had improved and relying on people who were smarter than myself, then it made sense why they made that signing. And he's a guy who can play inside and out too, so I like that versatility. Now he's definitely going to be on the outside because you have to have Mike Hilton in that nickel role. But this is the guy who now with William Jackson III being gone, he's slated to be the number one on the outside. I mean, maybe you think it's Chidobe Awuzie. I think it's going to be Wayne's, but either one of those two is going to have to step up. So maybe instead of Wayne's, you would have Awuzie in this spot. They're going to need some really quality outside corner production. And if they get that, plus Trey Hendrickson, then again, this team then could be in that 8-9 win range. But how does Wayne's respond after that injury? That's a position where you have to be athletic, you have to be explosive. How much does that injury take away from him? Or is Wayne's the same guy like he was 2 years ago when he was playing his best football, like I mentioned, in Minnesota? So obviously he has to be an X factor. On to some games to watch, then we'll close this video out. Week 4 against Jacksonville. This is definitely a game I feel like the Bengals can win. Both these teams are up and coming, and they're also up and coming because of number 1 overall picks, right? 2 years ago is Joe Burrow. This past year, it's Trevor Lawrence. So that's obviously a really fun matchup to see on paper. Plus, Cincinnati's at home. I'd like to see them come away with a win here. Week 8, they hit the road to take on the New York Jets, and this is also fun between, top tier QBs that really kind of came out of nowhere, right? Zach Wilson was not somebody that people were pegging to go in the first round out of BYU, and Joe Burrow made a huge climb up the board, being 6th, 7th round pick in the eyes of Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, to the number 1 overall pick given the year he had at LSU. So that's kind of fun that those guys had, similar-ish paths to being, top 2 picks respectively for each of them in the NFL draft. But again, this is another game I think Cincinnati can win. And if they're going to win 5 games, right, you have to really, if you want to come away with 5 wins, beat up on the teams that you actually can. I think the Bengals and Jets are about on level playing field. Power rankings, maybe they're a couple spots apart, but they're in the neighborhood to amount of talent on that roster. And they're both teams that have gone all in on the offense this offseason, right? Like the Jets bring in Elijah Vera-Tucker, they signed Corey Davis, they, draft Elijah Moore, and then for the Bengals, it's, drafting Jamar Chase, bringing in Riley Reif, all these things, and I think this creates a really fun shootout matchup, and they're two teams that are trying to figure out answers on the defense, so it feels like they're also in a similar spot. So a good litmus test to see who's maybe a little bit further along in the rebuild, the Bengals versus the Jets. And the last game, Week 15 at Denver. I always like having a late game to see, where was this team at the beginning of the year and where are they at the end? Did they get better? And that really comes in a factor with, is Zach Taylor going to keep his job, right? If this team Week 4 against the Jags looks like, abysmal, like they're just going to be a bummy team, but then by Week 15, they're playing really competitive with a Denver team in Denver, that could be a good sign of natural progression from that team across the board. And it might be enough to keep Zach Taylor as the head coach. Kind of think about what Anthony Lynn almost was able to do, right? Like Anthony Lynn was on the hot seat last year for the Chargers. Then they rip off 4 consecutive wins at the end of the year, and then question marks started to pop into the heads of people like, okay, well, is Lynn actually going to keep this job? He is a good leader. What are the Chargers going to do? Ultimately, Lynn loses his job, and if that happens to Zach Taylor, he's hoping something different happens. But nonetheless, this is also another matchup where I think the Bengals offense versus the Broncos defense, just natural polar opposites. I'd love to see those two. Who basically dictates the flow of that game? Is it a shootout? Because then the Bengals will win. Is it a defensive battle? Because then my money's on the Broncos. So that's obviously a fun one to watch as well. But that's going to do it for my 2021 Cincinnati Bengals season preview. Tell me what you think about the team down in the comment section. How many wins do you think they have? Who are some X factors, some games to watch? But also, tell me what you think about the new elements I added into this video. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. That's going to do it for this one. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.